Where do we come from? What is our true origin? Individually, as families, as companies, as countries, as a society. Wherever we live, whatever community we are part of, whatever work we do, we are living through really challenging times, and more challenges lie ahead. Right now, we have a massive global health crisis. For many, that also means an employment crisis, and indeed an economic crisis. We are also facing massive environmental challenges thanks to global warming and its impacts around the world. And societal tensions are growing due to polarization of wealth and racial injustices, and the refugee crisis, and a host of other related factors. To give a sense of how connecting with our true origins can help us navigate these challenges, let me share a little of my own story over the years. I remember watching the movie Romancing the Stone as a teenager. Something about the scenery struck a really visceral chord with me. Watching the credits at the end, I realized that it had reminded me very strongly of Colombia, my country of birth, but which I'd left at the age of 2. I had no active recollection of life in Bogota at all, or of understanding Spanish or that community, but somehow that memory was still buried deep inside. Since then, I've been lucky enough to live and work on 6 continents. I spent my formative years as a child surrounded by wildly different social cultures and physical environments, from the soft green civility of southern England to the bright dusty mountains of the Arab world. But one of the most magical moments of all was in Saudi Arabia, where the first time I remember sitting down in just 3 feet of water with a scuba tank on my back and could breathe underwater. Learning to dive opened the door to the extraordinarily magical environment beneath the waves, for me perhaps the ultimate form of meditation. Before I moved to the United States, I spent a dozen years living in Australia, home to what is probably the world's oldest civilization, the Aboriginal people of Australia. One of the most magical moments of my time there was when we took our 3 children, then aged about 5, 3 and 1, to visit Uluru. Their excitement as we flew into the local airport and as we approached the epicenter of Aboriginal culture was beyond palpable. It was like lightning turned into something with a physical form. So there is something about our origins, about the world around us, about the cultures in which we live, which is both incredibly powerful and powerfully grounding. It comes not just from our heritage, but from the way we live our lives. And yet our origins, our history, our culture are all too easily forgotten. 33 years ago, this 4th of July just passed, I arrived in the United States for the first time to spend the summer in Tucson, Arizona. Whilst I was there, I recall wanting to find out something about the history of the place. So I visited what I think was called the Arizona Historical Society in downtown Tucson. The thing that struck me most was that there was virtually nothing about the history of the Indigenous people of Arizona, just one set of traditional clothing in a dark and gloomy corner. That was it. It seemed so wrong. It seemed like a massive missed opportunity. So why does all this matter? Can remembering and rediscovering stories about our origins help us deal with the economic, environmental and social challenges we're now facing? We'd like this discussion to be as interactive as we can make it, and indeed as you can make it. So as we count down to the hour, please take a moment to introduce yourselves in the chat. Share your own perspectives there and any resources that you think may be useful. And please do ask questions in the Q&A function. That makes it easier for us to keep track of them and answer them if we can. Now, to guide us through this discussion, we have our wonderful guest host, Sara Wolcott, healer, speaker, entrepreneur, and legacy advisor. And she is joined from London by the social entrepreneur Dulma Clark, head of the newly established Livebarefoot Foundation by Vivobarefoot. From the west coast of the United States, we have Luis J. Rodriguez, an award-winning author. And from the Colorado River Indian tribes of Polacca, Arizona, we have Mona Polacca, who is a founding member of the International Council of 13 Indigenous Grandmothers. Thank you so much for joining us, for sharing your stories, and I hope inspiring us to act.